Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're really digging into a critical transition point in how societies organize themselves, moving through this framework our sources call the river of reality.
That's right. We're looking at how things evolve, almost like in layers.
Exactly, layers of problem solving. And today's focus is a big one. The shift from level 4, which is all about economics, the flow of commerce,
The world of markets, trade, individual transactions.
to level 5, the emergence of politics, of governance, the flow of governance. It's a fascinating jump.
It really is. And the core idea here, based on the sources, is that this isn't accidental. Politics isn't just something that happens. It necessarily emerges because level 4, the economic system, for all its power, creates problems it fundamentally cannot solve itself.
Right. It's like a system reaching its limits and needing a new kind of operating system almost.
That's a great way to put it, especially for a STEM-focused audience. You optimize one part, and that optimization creates new stresses, new instabilities that demand a higher-level control mechanism. We're talking about emergent properties leading to new challenges.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to unpack that narrative. Why does politics arise?
Yeah.
What is it, fundamentally, according to this model? And crucially, how does this new system try to manage the incredible power it concentrates? We'll be looking at the philosophy behind it all.
It promises some real aha moments, I think, connecting these big ideas to the systems we actually live in.
Definitely. Okay, let's unpack this. The inevitable cracks when markets fail to govern. So let's start with level 4, the flow of commerce. We have to acknowledge its incredible success rate, the spontaneous order of the market, the Cadillac.
It's an engine, a phenomenal engine for wealth creation, for coordinating knowledge across billions of people without any central planner.
Yeah, it's driven innovation, lifted standards of living.
Mm.
It's built on voluntary exchange, individual choices. Powerful stuff.
Incredibly powerful. But, and this is the crucial pivot point in the sources, that very success, driven by those individual choices and self-interest, starts to generate systemic problems.
Problems the market itself can't fix. These are the inevitable cracks, what we often call market failures.
Exactly. And thinking in systems terms, this is like hitting the operational limits of a design. The decentralized, individualistic logic of the market is brilliant for many things.
Allocating resources, finding efficient production methods.
Right, but it inherently lacks the tools to solve collective problems. Problems where individual rational choices don't add up to a good outcome for the group.
So these market failures aren't just small bugs.
No, not according to this framework. They're fundamental outcomes where individual rationality leads to collective irrationality. Think outcomes that are unsustainable or damaging for everyone involved, even though each person was acting logically from their own point of view.
That divergence, that's the pressure point.
That's the pressure point. It creates this functional demand, this need for a different kind of system, for politics.
Okay, let's make that concrete. The classic example that always comes up is Garrett Hardin's Tragedy of the Commons.
A really powerful metaphor from his 1968 essay.
Yeah, you've got this shared pasture, right? Open to all herders.
Right.
And each herder thinks, okay, if I add one more sheep.
I get all the benefit from selling that extra wool or milk.
Exactly. But the tiny bit of extra grazing, the slightly depleted grass, that cost is shared among everyone using the pasture. So for me, the benefit outweighs the cost.
Perfectly rational from the individual herder's perspective.
But everyone thinks that way. So everyone adds another sheep and another.
Until the pasture is completely overgrazed, destroyed, and useless for everyone. Collective ruin from individual rationality.
The mechanism is so clear. Concentrated individual benefits, dispersed collective costs.
And that mechanism is precisely what economists are talking about with negative externalities. These are costs dumped onto third parties.
People not involved in the decision, right?
Exactly. The cost of the degraded pasture, or thinking more broadly, the cost of polluted air from a factory, or the depleted fish stocks from overfishing. These costs aren't paid by the person making the economic decision.
So the market price doesn't reflect the true social cost.
Right. And because of that, the market systematically overproduces these negative things. It's a fundamental flaw in the pricing signal when these external costs exist.
And the examples are everywhere, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Overfishing is a huge one. Globally, deforestation, the logger gets the profit, the world deals with the climate and biodiversity impact, traffic congestion, adding your car seems rational, but everyone doing it grinds the whole system to a halt. industrial pollution affecting whole communities.
These aren't just accidents. They're built into the system's logic if left unchecked.
They're systemic byproducts. Now, it's important to mention Elinor Ostrom's work.
The Nobel winner, right?
Yeah, she showed that small, close-knit communities can sometimes create their own rules, their own social norms to manage commons effectively. They build trust, monitor each other.
But that breaks down at a larger scale.
That's the key point the sources emphasize. In a large, anonymous, modern society, those informal mechanisms often fail. The incentives for individual gain just overwhelm the weak social ties. And that creates the undeniable need for some kind of formal, coordinating authority.
A higher-level control system.
Yeah.
Because the market itself can't force people to restrain themselves for the collective good.
It simply lacks that mechanism, which brings us to the second major market failure.
Public goods. This one feels even more fundamental somehow.
I think it is. So public goods have two defining traits. First, they're non-excludable.
Meaning you can't stop anyone from benefiting, even if they didn't pay.
Exactly. Impossible, or just way too costly to even try. Second, they're non-rivalrous.
My using it doesn't stop you from using it.
Right. My enjoyment doesn't diminish yours, so classic examples.
National defense, maybe. A stable legal system. Clean air. Basic scientific research.
All perfect examples. Things that benefit everyone once they exist, and one person's benefit doesn't subtract from another's.
So why can't the market provide these?
Well, this is where Mancur Olson's free rider problem comes in, from his book The Logic of Collective Action. It's a killer insight. If a good is non-excludable, if people can benefit without paying a pay, what's the rational incentive for any private company or individual to provide it voluntarily?
Ah, right. Why pay if you can get it for free?
Precisely. Think about national defense again. Imagine a private company trying to fund it. They pay billions for ships, planes, soldiers.
And once it's there, it protects everyone.
Everyone. But the company can't send bills to every citizen and force them to pay. People would just, well, free ride. They get the benefit, security, without contributing to the cost.
So the private company goes bankrupt.
Or, more likely, they never even try to provide it in the first place. The business model makes no sense. So the market, left to its own devices, will drastically underprovide or simply not provide these essential public goods, even if everyone agrees they're incredibly valuable.
Wow. Okay, so that really lays out the paradox of level 4, doesn't it?
Sure.
The incredibly successful flow of commerce.
This engine of wealth and innovation.
It completely depends on things like the rule of law, contract enforcement, stable money, security. These public goods.
Foundational requirements for markets to even function properly.
Yet the market's own logic, individual rationality, voluntary exchange, makes it impossible for the market to produce those very foundations.
It's the ultimate collective action problem. The system can't bootstrap its own necessary conditions. It's like trying to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, logically impossible within the system itself.
So this isn't just about making markets a bit more efficient. It's about the survival of the system. It needs something else.
Exactly. The market can't provide its own framework. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because this creates the unavoidable demand signal for level 5. For politics, too. Politics as the study of force, the state, and the social contract. So you see how these systemic failures, the tragedy of the commons, the free rider problem with public goods, they don't just cause headaches. They create a powerful, functional demand for a whole new layer of organization.
A system with different tools.
Precisely. And that system is politics. And its defining tool, the thing that makes it fundamentally different from economics, according to this model, is force.
Force. That sounds pretty stark.
It is, but it's meant analytically here. The flow of governance emerges when society recognizes that achieving certain essential collective goals requires a central authority with the power to compel action, the power to coerce.
Because voluntary cooperation just hit its limit.
It hit its limit, especially at scale. You need a mechanism to overcome the free rider problem, to enforce rules against overexploitation. The market primarily uses incentives, carrots. Politics ultimately has this stick.
And this definition of politics as being about force, it lines up pretty well with how political scientists think about the state, doesn't it? I'm thinking of Max Weber.
Absolutely. It connects directly to Weber's famous definition of the modern state. He called it, let me get the phrasing right, a human community that successfully claims the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory.
Monopoly on legitimate force. Okay, unpack legitimate. That seems crucial.
It's absolutely crucial. Weber wasn't talking about just any violence. A criminal gang uses force, but it's not legitimate. The state's force is considered rightful, justified, accepted by the population, or at least a significant portion of it.
So it connects back to shared values,
Yeah.
social trust, maybe level 3 in this model.
Exactly. That legitimacy is key. Without it, the state is just organized crime, essentially. It loses the consent of the governed. But with that legitimate monopoly,
It has the tool it needs to solve those market failures.
yes, it can use its coercive power legitimately to collect taxes. And taxes are the solution to the free rider problem for public goods. Everyone is compelled to contribute.
Right. Funding defense, roads, legal systems.
And it can impose regulations, fines, penalties to curb negative externalities, pollution limits, fishing quotas, punishments for breaking contracts. It addresses the tragedy of the commons. It's the practical lever for collective action that the market lacked.
Okay, so the state emerges with this unique power. But why would people agree to this? Why would rational individuals hand over so much power, the monopoly on force, to this entity? That seems like a huge leap.
It is a huge leap, and that's where social contract theory comes in. It provides the philosophical justification.
The idea that we basically make a deal.
In essence, yes. The core idea, explored by thinkers like Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, is that individuals implicitly or explicitly agree to give up some of their natural freedom, the freedom to do whatever they want to a sovereign authority.
And what do they get in return?
Security, order,
Yeah.
protection of rights, the provision of those essential public goods. Basically, escape from the chaos and inefficiency of the state of nature.
And that state of nature, in this model, it's not necessarily some primitive past.
It doesn't have to be. You can think of it as the logical endpoint if a complex level 4 society collapses under its own weight. If the market failures become overwhelming, if trust breaks down, if cooperation fails, you end up in a situation like the state of nature. Chaos, conflict, insecurity.
So the social contract is a rational choice to avoid that breakdown.
That's the argument. Different thinkers emphasize different aspects. For Thomas Hobbes, writing during the English Civil War, the state of nature was terrifying, a war of all against all. Life was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short.
Sounds like a massive tragedy of the commons.
Very much so. For him, the only escape was to hand over almost all rights to an absolute sovereign, the Leviathan, just to get basic security and order. Anything was better than the chaos.
Pretty stark. What about Locke? He was more optimistic, wasn't he?
Yes, John Locke saw the state of nature as less bleak but still flawed. People had natural rights, life, liberty, property, but they were insecure because there was no impartial judge to resolve disputes or enforce rules.
So the state's role for Locke was more limited.
More limited, yes. Government acts as a neutral referee protecting those pre-existing rights. This clearly connects to the market's need for reliable contract enforcement, property protection, key public goods for commerce. The state secures the framework for level 4 to function well.
Okay. And Rousseau, he had a different take again.
Jean-Jacques Rousseau was different. He talked about the general will. The idea wasn't so much giving up rights to a separate ruler, but submitting to the collective will of the community itself.
For the common good.
Exactly. By participating in making laws for the common good, individuals achieve a higher collective form of freedom. It's about self-governance, not just security from chaos or protection of individual property.
Interesting. So different flavors, but they all end up justifying the state.
They all converge on the state as a rational response to the inherent problems of collective action that arise when society gets complex. Whether it's escaping chaos, protecting rights, or pursuing a common good, they all see the state with its legitimate force as necessary to compel cooperation, especially solving that free rider problem for the benefit of all.
So we've built the case for this powerful entity, the state. We've justified its monopoly on force through the social contract. But, and this feels like a big but,
Here comes the next challenge.
once you've created this incredibly powerful tool, this concentration of force, how on earth do you stop it from being misused? How do you control the controller?
That is the central question that Level 5 governance has to grapple with. 3, the architecture of governance, structuring and limiting force.
Right, because creating the state solves the problems of level 4, the market failures, but it immediately introduces this huge new risk, doesn't it? The risk of tyranny.
Exactly. The solution creates its own potential problem. It's a classic design challenge. Build something powerful, then figure out how to contain it, like designing safety systems for a powerful engine or, as you suggested, a nuclear reactor.
You need checks, balances, limits. a whole architecture.
Precisely. And the sources highlight that a stable, legitimate flow of governance isn't just about using force effectively, but about having a sophisticated internal structure to channel, constrain, and ultimately limit that force.
So how did political philosophy tackle this? What's the architectural blueprint?
Well, one of the most influential blueprints comes from the French philosopher Montesquieu in his work, The Spirit of the Laws.
Ah, the separation of powers guy.
The separation of powers guy, exactly. His core idea was incredibly insightful. To preserve political liberty, power must be a check to power. You can't trust anyone or any single group with too much concentrated authority.
So he proposed dividing the government's functions.
Yes. He identified 3 fundamental types of governmental power. The legislative, which makes the laws.
Like Parliament or Congress.
Right. Then the executive, which enforces the laws, runs the administration, handles defense.
The president, the prime minister, the government departments.
And finally, the judicial, which interprets the laws and settles disputes.
The courts.
The courts. And Montesquieu's crucial warning was that if any 2 or worse, all 3 of these powers were held by the same person or body, liberty would be impossible.
Why? What happens if they're combined?
Well, think about it. If the same group makes the laws and enforces them, they could create oppressive laws and then brutally enforce them without any pushback. Tyranny.
And if they also controlled the courts?
Then there's no impartial justice. The rulers could interpret the laws however they like to benefit themselves or punish opponents. Complete arbitrary power.
So separating them is key.
It's fundamental. Vesting these 3 functions in separate, independent branches, legislature, executive, judiciary, creates a system where, as the saying goes, ambition must be made to counteract ambition.
Checks and balances.
Exactly. Each branch can check the power of the others. The legislature makes laws, but the executive can veto them. The executive enforces laws, but the judiciary can declare them unconstitutional. The judiciary interprets laws, but the legislature can change the laws, and the executive appoints the judges.
It's like a robust engineering design, really. Redundancy, fail-safes, preventing any single point of failure from bringing the whole system down.
That's a perfect analogy for a STEM audience. It's structural containment of power, but structure alone isn't enough.
Right. You can have a perfectly balanced system, but what should that system actually be allowed to do? Where does its legitimate power end, even if it's divided?
That's the next crucial question. It's about the scope of government power, not just its internal structure. And for that, we often turn to John Stuart Mill.
On liberty, another foundational text.
Absolutely. Mill provides probably the most famous philosophical boundary for state action, the harm principle.
Okay, what's the principle?
Mill put it very simply. The only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others.
Only to prevent harm to others.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
the key qualifier. What this principle explicitly rejects is the state interfering for what it considers the person's own good.
Paternalism. The state acting like your parent, telling you what's best for you.
Exactly. Mill says no. The state can't force you to do something or stop you from doing something just because it thinks it will make you healthier or morally better or save your soul. In actions that only affect yourself, Mill famously said, the individual is sovereign.
So it carves out this protected space for the individual.
A sphere of personal liberty, freedom of conscience, what you believe, freedom of thought and expression, what you think and say, freedom of tastes and pursuits, how you choose to live your life.
As long as you're not harming other people in the process.
That's the crucial caveat. Your liberty ends where harm to others begins. But within that boundary, the state should leave you alone.
So this acts as a vital philosophical limit on that powerful state we created.
It's meant to. It ensures that the coercive power needed for public goods and order doesn't become a tool for enforcing conformity or imposing the majority's lifestyle or beliefs on minorities. It protects individual autonomy and diversity.
Okay, so we have the separation of powers for structure and the harm principle for scope. That seems like a pretty good setup for containing state power.
It's a sophisticated design built on centuries of thought and experience. But, and here's the final turn in our sources, there's still a fundamental lingering problem, an endemic risk that maybe can't be fully designed away. 4. The endemic risk of governance, the problem of power. Yeah, despite these clever architectures and philosophical boundaries, level 5 governance, the political realm, still contains this inherent instability. The very act of concentrating legitimate force, even if you divide it and try to limit its scope, creates a persistent danger.
A danger baked into the system itself.
That's the argument. It defines the ultimate, perhaps unsolvable problem of politics. It's about the nature of power itself.
And this is where Lord Acton comes, right? With that incredibly famous quote.
The very one. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We hear it all the time. Maybe it sounds a bit tired.
But the original context is powerful.
It really is. He wrote it in a letter debating whether powerful historical figures, popes, kings, should be judged more leniently because of their positions. Acton argued the opposite,
He thought they should be judged more harshly.
or at least with a strong presumption against them. Because his profound insight was that power isn't neutral. It actively changes the person who wields it.
So.
It erodes moral integrity, he argued. It distorts judgment. It makes people arrogant, less empathetic, more likely to abuse their authority. He concluded rather grimly that great men are almost always bad men, precisely because the power they held had corrupted them.
Wow. So power itself is the corrupting agent.
That's Acton's diagnosis. And this points to the ultimate problem that level 5 governance creates. The state is set up to be the final judge, the enforcer, the entity that holds everyone else accountable.
Right. Individuals, companies, organizations, they're all under the state's authority.
But then the critical question arises, the one that echoes through political philosophy. Quis custodia ipsos custodes? Who guards the guardians? Who holds the state itself accountable?
Because there's nothing above the state in a worldly sense.
Exactly. Within the system of nations, a sovereign state typically lacks a higher temporal authority to judge its actions or enforce constraints upon it. International law exists, yes, but enforcement is notoriously tricky. Domestically, you have checks and balances, elections, public opinion, but ultimately the state apparatus itself holds the final monopoly on legitimate force.
So it's not just a practical problem of oversight, it's deeper.
It's the fundamental philosophical problem of sovereignty. How can the ultimate authority be reliably constrained? How do you ensure its legitimacy over the long run? How do you control power itself when power is the final arbiter?
It's a recursive loop almost, a meta problem.
Precisely. It's the defining challenge of the political condition. How does a society manage, critique, and direct its own most powerful creation, the state, without becoming its victim?
For our listeners thinking in systems terms, it's like the ultimate feedback and control problem. How do you design self-correction when the system itself defines the rules and holds the ultimate power? Can it truly regulate itself effectively?
That's the deep, enduring question. So what does this all mean? This problem of power corrupting and the difficulty of holding the ultimate power accountable. It isn't just a bug we can patch.
It's a fundamental feature of Level 5 governance. The price you pay, perhaps, for solving the problems of Level 4.
That seems to be the implication from the sources. You solve the practical problems of collective action, but you create this profound philosophical and political challenge of controlling the solution itself. Outro.
Well, we've certainly journeyed through some deep waters today. We started with the flow of commerce, the market.
Seeing its incredible power, but also its inherent limitations, the tragedy of the commons, the failure to provide public goods.
These emergent failures creating that undeniable need for something more, leading us to Level 5. Politics, the flow of governance.
Defined by its unique capacity to use legitimate force. Justified by the social contract, that grand bargain trading some freedom for order and collective benefits.
We saw how this allows the state to take action, taxing for public goods, regulating externalities, solving those problems the market couldn't.
But then we immediately confronted the danger inherent in concentrating that much power. The double-edged sword, as you called it.
Yeah, a necessary tool, but potentially lethal, which led us to the ingenious attempts to contain it.
Montesquieu's separation of powers, creating internal checks and balances.
And Mill's harm principle, trying to draw a philosophical line around individual liberty, limiting the scope of state action.
Essential safeguards, vital architecture. Yet, as Lord Acton warned us, power itself remains problematic.
That final, profound challenge, power's tendency to corrupt, and the ultimate question of who holds the state accountable when it's the highest authority.
Exactly. Level 5 solves Level 4's practical issues, but it generates this deeper philosophical problem. Questions like, what makes a law just? How should this immense power be directed ethically? Politics, focused on force and control, can't fully answer those questions from within his own logic.
It points towards needing something more. A higher level of reflection, maybe.
Yeah. That seems to be the implication. A need for ethical frameworks, ongoing critique, perhaps even another level of societal organization focused on values and meaning to guide the hand that holds the power.
So, the deep dive into governance really underscores that building powerful systems is only half the battle. The other, maybe harder, half is keeping them legitimate, accountable, and ensuring they actually serve the society that created them.
And don't end up dominating it.
Which leaves us and you with a final thought to ponder. If the problem of power is inherent to politics, what kind of higher-order thinking, what kind of societal reflection or perhaps even system do you think is needed to truly grapple with and master this problem of power?
Something to mull over.
Definitely. Keep thinking, keep questioning the systems around you, and join us next time on The Deep Dive.